Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Madalene Mielke, AAPI's President and CEO, and welcome to another installment of AAPI's Legislative Leadership Series, the first of two this week. Today, we are proud to present a discussion on veterans in the workforce. I'd like to thank our panel sponsors, Dell Technologies and Toyota, for their support at this event and of AAPI's. Before we get the panel started, I am thrilled to introduce Congressman Mark Takano, who is joining us to deliver opening remarks. Congressman Takano represents California's 41st district and was elected to Congress in 2012. In addition to serving on the House Education and Labor Committee, he is the chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. Congressman Takano is not just a member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, also known as CAPAC, he is also the second vice chair, as well as the chair of their Education Task Force. Congressman Takano consistently advocates for the AAPI community, and we appreciate his support. We're proud to have him joining us this afternoon, so please help me welcome Congressman Mark Takano.
Thank you, Madalene Mielke, for that kind introduction. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you all virtually this afternoon. As chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and vice chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, it feels like you all made this panel discussion just for me. It's clear that not only is it critical to hire our veterans, but we also must focus on hiring across our increasingly diverse veteran community. And that includes AAPI veterans. Through my work with the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, I have the duty and privilege to advocate for veterans across the country. And one of our biggest challenges is learning how to support veterans as they transition from service member to veteran. And the COVID-19 pandemic has made this even more difficult. During this uncertain time, we have to do more to support veterans every step of the way, from transitioning to civilian life to finding a job. Our committee has already begun this work to expand education and job training benefits, but we have to go beyond just ensuring veterans have access to these services. We need to help veterans build a plan of action that ensures each veteran can put his or her unique skills and experiences to use. My good friend, Congresswoman Julia Brownley, introduced the Help Hire Our Heroes Act to help veterans do just that. And our service members gain invaluable experience and skills during their service, skills that will be easily transferable to companies. Her bill would restart the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program and help ease the transition from service member to veteran with retraining opportunities. But that's where we need companies to step up. Through partnerships with industry leaders like yourselves and veteran service organizations, we can support veterans throughout this transition and equip them with the tools they need to succeed. By committing to hiring veterans, companies can make a statement to peers across all industries that we must invest in those who have served our country. We want to thank both Dell and Toyota for their hard work in this space and for their dedication towards hiring our heroes. The fact is, veterans are uniquely positioned to adapt to our changing economic landscape. Through their service, veterans have learned to put mission first. They've been trained to identify problems and respond accordingly while working with fellow service members from all backgrounds. And they know what it's like to work under pressure when more than just a mission is on the line. When we talk about hiring veterans, we also have to ensure we are talking about hiring all of our veterans. Our veteran population is changing with more women, minority, and Native veterans than ever before. And just as I continue pushing VA to better care for our growing veteran community, I challenge companies to do the same and ensure they hire from our increasingly diverse veteran population. Now, I hope each of you will lead the charge to hire our veterans and support our service members as they transition from active duty into civilian life. I want to thank you all for having me here today, and I thank you for your efforts to support our veterans.
Thank you, Congressman Takano, for kicking us off today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and thank you for all of your work in representing our community. Without further ado, I will now introduce the moderator of today's panel, Debra Wada. In addition to being the Executive Director for the U.S. Family Health Plan Alliance, Debra is also the CEO of Sensei AMI Advisors, LLC, a government consulting firm that provides strategic advice to corporations and organizations seeking to engage with Congress and the Department of Defense. In 2017, Debra was appointed to the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. Previously, she served as the Assistant Secretary of Manpower and Reserves Affairs for the United States Army. And prior to her appointment by President Obama, Debra has spent over 25 years in Congress, including over a decade of experience on the House Armed Services Committee. All that to say, she is the perfect person to moderate this discussion. For those of you joining us on Facebook, please put your questions in the comment section. And if you're joining through the webinar, please use the Q&A chat box feature. Debra, it's all yours.
Madalene, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for having me here today to be part of this discussion. I think it's going to be a great discussion, and I look forward to it. Let me take this opportunity to introduce our two panel speakers. We have Lou Candiello, who is the Senior Manager in Diversity Talent Acquisition for Dell Technologies and has been with the company for over 16 years. In his role, he is responsible for the diversity recruiting strategy aligned to ethnicity, individuals with disability, and underrepresented groups and genders for North America. Lou also leads the Neurodiversity Autism Hiring Program Career Restart, as well as Dell's Veteran and Military Spouse Strategy. It's a mouthful, Lou. You have a lot on your plate going on. Lou also joined the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve while still in high school, and his desire to serve came at an early age. He is the son of a World War II veteran who served in the Army in the China, Burma, India theater. And Lou was called to active duty during college and served as a corporal during Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield as an aircraft firefighting and rescue crew chief. In support of Dell Technologies' Veterans and Military Spouse Strategy, he partners closely with military service organizations, military bases, universities, and community-based organizations to attract, recruit, and retain transitioning service members, military spouses, and student veterans. In addition, Lou is one of the national leaders of Dell Technologies Veterans and Supporter Employee Resource Group and is also responsible for leading Dell's effort as a founding member of the Veterans Job Mission. Obviously, Lou's been working 24/7, 365, given his background that he has. I would like also to give a welcome to our second panelist, Cowan Young. Cowan is the Executive Director for the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Alliance, a national nonprofit community-based organization in Gardenia, California since 2007. The NHPI is dedicated to advocacy, education, research, and promotion of the health and well-being, as well as other related services such as healthcare, health and mental health, community health screening events, immigration and citizenship, veterans, civic engagement, and voter registration. So obviously Cowan's been a little busy for this last several months. The NIHP within the United States Ms. Young was employed by the late Honorable Eni Faleo Mavaenga, the U.S. House of Representative from American Samoa, and Ms. Young began as a staffer and was promoted to Congressman Scheduler, Assistant Office Manager, and Case Manager, doing casework in healthcare, Social Security, immigration, veterans, and academy applicants. Ms. Young continues to work closely with veteran service organizations and veterans and seeks assistance from the Center for Minority Veterans Affairs, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and veteran service organizations to help veterans with their claims and benefits. And Ms. Young reflects on a Samoan proverb, "Ole ala I le pule o lau tau tau." The road to leadership is through service, and hopefully I have not massacred that Samoan proverb too badly. So welcome to both of you today to our discussion on veterans in the workforce. I think it's very timely given we have this pandemic going on and unemployment, while has been going back up slightly, we still have a pretty high unemployment rate around the country. And I'm sure that our veterans are not being left behind in their challenges in finding transition employment. So with that, I want to open up the discussion here. So Colin, could you share with us some of the work that NHPI does with the PI veterans community? Colin, I think you're going to have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry about that. No technical difficulty. Okay, thank you, Deborah. Yes, the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Alliance, basically what we do, as you mentioned, first we network with the Center of Minority Veterans of Minority under the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And in turn, they also refer us to local and state Veteran Affairs regional offices. And what we do is basically is we provide in our community, we hold events such as health and wellness events. We also hold church gatherings, church activities, festivals, cultural events, and health screening. So basically, in those our NHPI community, I assist and help coordinate with these groups. You know, resources, help provide resources, also help their healthcare system, mobile health screening unit come out to provide some health screening for our veteran families and veterans. And then I also have assisted in coordinating with VSOs and VA reps in assisting our veterans, our PI veterans with their claims and their benefits. So, you know, because they have, even though they are proficient, bilingual and proficient in conversation of English, the questions and the process is very technical for them. So we try to we ensure that we have folks from the department, Veterans Department, as well as VSOs to help. And then we have a person, whether they're Samoans or Tongans or whichever Pacific Islander community group it is, you know, have a person there to help assist in translating for them.
Great.
But lastly is hopefully to have the first Pacific Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander National Summit.
And that would be?
Well, it was scheduled for this year, but due to COVID, as we all know, we have postponed it, and we're still working things out. And it's a joint effort with the Center of Minority Veterans Affairs. It will be a joint effort with them, and hoping sometime next year in Washington, D.C.
Great. Liu,
Yes.
having read your bio, I mean, you obviously Dell has been a leader in sort of veterans transition efforts, and as you being at Dell for such a long period of time, you obviously were in it, right down in the grassroots, working with veterans and in their transition. Can you talk to us about Dell's commitment and your commitment to veteran communities and why it's important to the company and what your role is?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot packed into my bio. For me, within Dell Technologies, while I am a veteran myself, the journey probably didn't start for me in getting intentional about the veteran space until about 9 years ago, when there was really high spikes in unemployment for veterans and their families. At the time, we were one of the original members of what is now the Veteran Jobs Mission. It was 11 companies that kind of came together, JP Morgan, Cisco, AT&T, Verizon, some other companies, to kind of share those best practices to see what we could do about that tragic tragedy that happened so many years ago. So we kind of dove in and just shared best practices on how we would go about doing that. With the culture of Dell, you have to understand Dell Technologies is a different company today than it was even 5 or 6 years ago with the merger of what was EMC Corporation. So we're 145,000, 150,000 team members strong. And ironically, both Michael Dell and the former founder of EMC, Dick Egan, both have fathers that were veterans. So we understand how the company is comprised and understand that the culture that we share within this is very much aligned to some of those competencies and culture traits that you see with veterans. So everything from quick learners, team members, resiliency, having a very diverse perspective on how to solve problems, all kind of comes together as a strength for us. So we definitely see that as a undertapped kind of differentiator in the talent pool, if you will. So yeah, we see the alignment to the culture and the leadership principles that we share at Dell Technologies line up very well with veterans and military spouses as well.
I guess when you've put your program together and having now run it for a while, are you seeing any sort of issues in veterans transitioning that you would sort of highlight for our listeners here today? So that
yeah, I think some of the same challenges exist over the course over the past 9 years or so, and it's some of it is how to transition, the training and awareness. We understand that less than 1% actually wear the uniform and serve their country. So you're talking about a 99% of people out there that don't really understand the culture, the language, the jargon, rank structure, whatever it is about the military. And so there's that disconnect. So there's a lot of opportunity, constant opportunity to kind of help bridge that gap between hiring managers, recruiters, and the like, everything from reading a resume and understanding the hidden strengths within there and what that jargon all means. So that's been a challenge throughout. And then just also the effort that each service member puts into their transition is a big indicator on how well they might be successful in coming out, right? How well they take advantage of the TAP program, how well they learn about the power of their network, all come into play when trying to identify the next role for them. Because we want to make sure when they do come in, they understand the culture of the company they're joining, the type of role they'll be taking on, and how it might differ from the type of experiences and responsibility that they had in the military.
Great, thank you. Cohen, are there sort of unique issues that you've seen in working with the veterans from the Pacific Islander communities that you would want to highlight here for our listeners as well?
Okay, well, first of all, overall arching challenge has been, as I mentioned with Congressman Takano, was both full inclusion and disaggregation of data is key for our Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islander, as well as Asian American communities, you know, whether it's even with the veterans, you know, so, and providing assistance for diverse communities, but that also gives a better understanding and provide the real portrayal of our people's health status, you know, because we're often ignored and underrepresented. So those challenges, you know, like for our veterans, yes, there are some that hold essential workers, or as well as small businesses, you know, and managerial types of position. So it does hurt, you know, it does hurt, and a challenge for many of our folks. But we do try to do, I mean, you know, we we try to provide resources and as well as, you know, information to help, you know, families. We have like, whether they're veterans or not veterans, but non-veterans, but we try to provide like food for families, you know, because some of these workers, you know, are having, or even with the veterans having difficulties in transitioning to other occupations. But mind you, our Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are social and community family-oriented people. We come from a large household, which is multi-generational. And, you know, so in veteran families, we have elders, you know, as well as, you know, you have younger vets that come home, you know, and just trying to deal with, you know, what they need to do to be safe, as well as being safe as they go home because of our elders, you know, because even with the elders, they have, you know, some of our elders do have, many of our elders have multiple underlying health conditions. So we have a higher case rate of COVID-19. So, you know, and that's case rate per 100,000 as well as deaths. So those are some of the challenges, you know, we face within our community, even though we may be a very small population.
Thank you. Lou, could you share with us a little bit about the types of programs that Dell offers for veterans, and how they kind of help in the transition of veterans when they're seeking to move into the private sector?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So it's an interesting, I'll kind of set the table, is right now, last fall, Michael Dell put forth these progress made real goals that he has for the company. He wants by the year 2030 to a strong emphasis on diverse hiring. So we have goals, public goals stated that 50% of the workforce will be female, 40% of his leaders will be women. He wants to see about 25% of that workforce be Black, African American, and then he also wants another 14% to be in the Hispanic range. So he really wants to try to put pressure against, you know, those goals to make sure that we have that representation, that we look like our customers and the rest of the world. So we can actually leverage that kind of framework and double down on veteran talent, because we do see that, as I mentioned earlier, a talent differentiator and an undertapped talent pool. If we can kind of do this the right way, focus female veteran programs as well as underrepresented groups, I think we see a true advantage and business impact. So that's the setting. Then tactically going out and kind of setting the table and building those relationships, understanding at all points in transition where we might see opportunity. So we have been able to work closely with Hiring Our Heroes, right? I think that's a no-brainer. In particular, their corporate fellowship program that they offer, and we're now starting to explore the spouse one as well. We've also partnered with Onward to Opportunity, where we give away technology training from one of our divisions called Dell Boomi. And then we also curate that content and that curriculum up for free ourselves and offer it as a Dell Veteran Academy, free training for certification on a technical certification. And if we can't hire the folks that receive those certifications, then we work with our partners and share those candidates' profiles and resumes with our partners ourselves. The list goes on. And folks are probably very familiar with Microsoft Software and Systems Academy. That's a great resource for us to really tap into those that are serious about pursuing a career in technology. But also on the flip side, we also start to think about those that have served and are looking to take advantage of their GI Bill. So we do focus on student veterans. Each summer we hire about 2,000 summer interns, but knowing that student veterans might have a non-traditional, not living on campus with the rest of the students, engagement, that we have to approach that a little bit differently. So we explore programs and partner with like 4 Block, That's another great career readiness program that's kind of focused on that, just out of college or just nearing college or coming out of college type of program. And the list goes on. MBA Veterans Conference, Service Academy Career Conferences, and currently right now the Veterans and Supporters Employee Resource Group is looking to build out or partner with Debra Wada to build a robust veteran mentoring program.
Great, thank you. And would they be able to find all this information on Dell website?
Yeah, I'll put it in the window when we have a Dell military careers page dedicated to veterans.
We have one of our listeners that is on today reach out last night and talked about sort of the challenges in transition, right? In the military, you're told what to do, what to wear, where to be, when to be there, you know, down to pretty much in the military, your life is sort of very structured. And then as you get ready for a transition, we tell you, here's a TAP program, here's how you should do it, and then go off. And I think historically we have found that transitioning veterans have challenges. One in that transition, right? From now being responsible for how do I get my health care? How do I find a company that is the right fit for me? Because obviously company culture is very important. And we know that when you serve, particularly in the military and in the last several years of conflict, the development of this sort of, I would say, trying to be gender neutral here, but brotherhood of being able to rely on your colleagues as actually sort of your family members to that extent, that relationships to get developed while you're in the uniform. It's hard to sort of find in that same corporate culture when you first come out. So how should veterans who are transitioning best assess a company's culture, like Dell's or like any other private sector corporation, to figure out whether this is the right fit for them, that they may want to make that jump from the military service to private sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it starts, there's sometimes a misexpectation, like, hey, I served, I'll put my resume together and I'll get hired rather quickly. But again, we talk about that less than 1% serve, and how that translation occurs and what that looks like. So I think if a service member is transitioning, they need to ask themselves, the number one question is, who do I know? Who do I know that's recently transitioned? Who used to be my CO? Who used to be my XO? Who's my staff NCO in charge that I know is out there and being successful today? So using your own network within the companies that might have interest to you. But then stretching and building out areas in which you don't know. So if you, for instance, don't know anyone at Dell Technologies, you can do a simple search through LinkedIn. LinkedIn offers premium access for transitioning service members. They get a premium account. And then you can reach out to any veteran within Dell Technologies and say, hey, you were in the Army, I'm in the Army. Do you have a half an hour to spend and share some time with me and talk about the culture of the company? And I think that sounds so obvious, but it's literally the largest brotherhood and sisterhood out there that's willing to take time with you and kind of walk you through and help you better understand the culture of a company. There's also a lot of, companies like to put a lot of flair on their websites, GI jobs and this and that, stuff like that. Kind of work through that and understand what you can sense from the culture of a company. I know for Dell, for instance, for the past 8 years, we've been listed on the world's most ethical companies. And if you did a little research, you could come to find out that I had mentioned before, Michael Dell's dad was actually a dentist in the Army. And that's why they're in Texas, because he served at Fort Hood. But understanding that culture, our chief diversity officer, his dad was a Marine. Our chief operating officer, his dad, the number 2 at the company, his dad was in the Air Force. So, is that culture something I'm going to experience if I were to come on board? How seriously does the company really take continuing service, right? So do they have an ERG that would support me, an employee resource group, I'm sorry. Am I able to be able to pay back and pay forward those that are still in the uniform? Those sorts of things that will culturally align to your values as a veteran. Are they the same within the company as best you can?
Great, thank you very much. Colin, I mean, it's very difficult, right? Change is very hard for anyone, and when you're, particularly if you've been in the service for over 20 years, it is a culture shock, I would say, from moving from a culture that you grew up in, you know very well, and then moving to something different. So, any help that I think our transitioning service members can get is beneficial. Cohen, a question from the audience actually was, how has the quality of life for veterans in the NHPI community changed over time, and especially now during a global pandemic?
Well, thank you for the question. It is challenging for diverse cultures, and especially, as I mentioned, from a small population. However, veterans, all families, and as well as veterans, when they transition over, finding support means for their families, and as I mentioned, sometimes the families are multi-generational, so in order to support or keep them safe from COVID-19, it's a whole totally different type of thinking process, um, and because of the different, I mean, even though uh, we are considered as Pacific Islanders, but we have like, it encompasses like 20 different, distinct communities. And that's, of course, Native Hawaiians, Samoans, Chamorros, Fijians, Tongans. You have the Marshallese, the Chukis, the Tahitians, the Palauans, So um, even though we are, what binds us together of our communities is knowing our history and just having that strong spiritual set mind and heart, to push us through this. And we're still the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Alliance is still building in helping our veterans, as I mentioned earlier. That has been a community that really hasn't been paid, well, I don't want to say not paid much attention to, but we're beginning more and more, working, trying to help provide resources, for them, whether it's healthcare, small businesses, because we have many veterans, PI veterans that have good business, small business owned, you know. For example, my brother, he is, he's a veteran from the Navy, and he has his own business, in Georgia, Alpharetta, Georgia, but it goes across the US. So folks like that, but it's just plowing in, as Lou has said, you try to provide as much resources as you possibly can, and then you also look, as I mentioned, about the multi-generational family. Sometimes we look to our elders to help care for, either their grandchildren or their nieces, nephews, because culturally, our elders are the keepers to our cultural history as well as our family legacy, and as well as traditions and language. So our elders also, those are things that they pass on down to our younger generation, that, and which binds our communities. So, but with that, we're still trying to help in providing resources for families, and yes, it is a challenge, but we just have to continue to think that we'll plow through it and be positive.
Great, thanks. Lou, I'm just wondering, you know, there's, one is if we have two sort of, I think, types of people who are transitioning. One is the individual who may have been in the service for 20 years, has that network, you know, has a much more developed network, a better sense of maybe what they want to do, or maybe have considered sort of the things they want to do. And then we have the younger first term, maybe even second term service member coming out, less of a network developed, maybe still has not decided what he or she may want to do next. Is there resources that maybe Dell or other companies have that can kind of help these transitioning service members take a look at, so that they can, whether they're a much more a mature individual leaving the service or a younger individual leaving the service, that they're sort of, what resources would you recommend to them, and would they be the same or would they be different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I saw some stuff in the Q&A kind of pop up in that regard as well. I would actually say that the longer you spend in, sometimes it's more difficult to understand what you're good at. I joke with most veterans, any job description we read, we can say, yeah, I can do that. Just give me a book and I can figure it out. Unless it's hardcore technical, like coding and software development, stuff like that. But innate in all of us, we look at the description like, yeah, I could do that. So we'll see people applying for entry-level jobs all the way to executive director of type positions. So it is different depending on your experience level. So, you know, I think actually the less time you have in the military, you're probably able to kind of line of sight what your competencies are and kind of how those kind of walk across, right? Some things are pretty straightforward, you know, logistics is logistics, you know, finance is finance. But like, how do we explain one of our senior vice presidents in sales was a Marine Corps infantry officer. So there's got to be something there with competencies to understand like how they lead, how they develop a plan, how they kind of figure out adversity and all those sorts of things. So there is a bit of exploration that needs to occur, and there's some safe places in which you can try to start those things out. I mentioned Onward to Opportunity earlier. They offer a lot of free classes to try out for service members and veterans to take a look at. Am I good at project management? Should I take a class on that? Maybe I'll take a stab at taking some entry-level IT or software development classes, right? That can kind of get you started in that direction. Other ones are, I mentioned earlier, the Corporate Fellowship Program. There's the Department of Defense Skill Bridge program that allows you to actually try on and do some job shadowing before you're able to leave the military to see if that role would be of importance, something that would line up to you. One thing I'm working on currently is apprenticeships, right? So there's a lot of, often when we leave the service, some folks step back into college at the community college level. Many community colleges offer now apprenticeship programs in certain technology fields and non-technology related fields that allow you to kind of experience that on-the-job experience while you're getting trained up by the company or by the college. So that's another area in which you could investigate. And I'll go back to, don't discount who you know and who you don't know. It's people are more than willing to share their experiences and help you better understand what it takes to be in a certain profession or a certain career. So I hope that helps.
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Well, as the Vice Chair of Military Service for the National Commission on Military National Public Service, we've also have been looking at this, right? Like, how do we encourage people actually to come into service? And part of that was the use of trying to get younger Americans, high school kids, to understand what their skills and what their sort of strengths and weaknesses are. And we came across the Department of Labor's career assessment tool. So I'm just wondering if you have ever seen that, and if you had any thoughts of whether that is something that a transitioning service member would be beneficial to use. No.
Me, no, I have not heard of that. One thing I neglected to mention, I was typing it in the answer window, was the person that's it says student veteran, is Student Veterans of America, right? That's another great organization that helps people kind of move through that. And a lot of more colleges have career offices that are dedicated to student veterans as well. But I'll find the URL and I can type it in the answer down here as well.
Great. So I think we talked about some of the things that we had wanted to raise. So I'm going to take a couple questions early from the chat box. So we have one, I think, that says, how significant is Vivera when it comes to supporting veterans hiring? And for those who may not know, Vivera is, I believe, the Vietnam Era Veterans Readjustment Act, if I'm correct. But which is was supposed to set goals on hiring authorities for companies to meet, and the way that they can do that in terms of promotion of job opportunities, making sure that they reach out to qualified veterans, that sort of thing. Lou, do you have anything that you could share on what Dell thinks?
Yeah, we take it pretty seriously. I call it VEVRA. I don't know.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Tomato. I don't know. There's so many acronyms. OFCCP as well as another one, right? So if you think about companies like Dell, we do a lot of business with the federal government, and that's important to us. And we want to make sure that we're in good standing and hitting our goals, and at least trying to achieve our goals when it comes to those percentages of how many protected veterans we should be hiring. So I think the number now is 5.7% of our employee population and hires should fall into the protected veteran category. It's a lot. It does take a lot to kind of move in that direction, but the good faith efforts in getting there allows us then to be able to bid on contracts with the government and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's really the talent differentiator. Like I said before, like a veteran can do more than a civilian can do in most instances. That's my biased opinion. I'll just say that.
Appreciate it. I guess, Colin, I think we had a question actually about the, if I recall it correctly, there was a question about the, if we have data, more definitive data on the AAPI community, and particularly the PI community, and sort of the issues that are being faced. Let me see if I can find that question. Oh, how has the quality of life for veterans in NHPI changed over time, especially now during the global pandemic?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, whether you are veterans or non-veterans, the case rate per 100,000 is very high for our community, our Native Hawaiian, our NHPI communities, as well as death rates, right? Because we are, as I mentioned, though we are a relatively small population, but we are in high risk because of the due to the multiple underlying health conditions. And so when we're talking about veterans, and I'm referring to the elders, you know, there are those that have underlying health issues. And so the case rate of death could be high because of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
But, oh, you're welcome.
Do you wanted to add something to that?
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers, you know, with me at hand, but we can always, you know, if they provide the information, my contact information, if needing more, you know, data, because that's one thing, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're always invisible when it comes to, you know, disaggregating data, and that's
Right.
what we are thoroughly pushing.
Thank you. I think we have, so another question that popped up was, no one ever asked me what I wanted to do through the transition class, and they went through it twice. They all wanted me to get a job similar to what I was doing in the Navy, and I wanted to work for a nonprofit, but my last salary was too high. So now I'm working in big data like Lou and volunteering the AAPI and immigrant-centric community-based organizations like Cowan, but it took me 3 years to get there by stumbling around in the dark. So is there a thought to sort of, how can we help individuals like that who want to maybe do something different than what they were doing in the military, find their right place? And is there a process or a program that we could help develop or provide that would help in that sort of understanding of transition? Do you have any thoughts, Lou or Cowan?
Well, it really depends. Well, like you said, whatever their expertise was in the experience was in the military, and then have a change of thought when they transition out. You know, like Lou had mentioned, you know, with all the resources that they have, especially there could be someone in, I mean, if it was a Pacific Islander, a Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, you know, they would outreach to like community-based organizations, churches, you know, because that's where we normally formulate social and cultural groups, you know. They can ask them for, you know, requests. I mean, just navigating through all of those groups, they'll be able to find, you know, resources that can help them, or even with the Veterans Affairs, you know, and who they can refer them to. Yeah. But I would love to connect with Lou on some of his resources, and just, you know, just to get more build on what we're trying to do for, you know, opening doors for our Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islander veterans.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I think sometimes it's not a simple across, right? So the joke I say often is, yeah, you can go onto our Dell military careers page, you can type in your MOS, in my instance is a 7051, and there are 0 jobs available for me here at Dell Technologies. I'm not qualified to work here. Don't tell anyone that, but they don't want aircraft firefighters. There's no skill that walks across and says you're a firefighter, you put wet stuff on hot stuff, you should have a job here. So it goes back to those really thinking internally and self-reflective, like what you think your strengths are. And being honest about them, right? What can you do? How do you lead? Have you done projects? And I see this come up a lot when I have just resume discussions. Once a week, I try to spend at least an hour with a veteran to walk through their resume. And it's a lot of red ink, right? There's no specifics, led and did this, and, you know, but there's no kind of concrete, well, what did you really do and what were the results? So trying to get a person's mindset to move away from team orientation to individual ownership of being proud of the things that you led and the things that you did is sometimes a challenge for those that are still transitioning. The whole I and me, that's not how we go about talking about the accomplishments that we've had as a team. So really kind of honing them in on that, and then really getting specific about where do we start to see those competencies, because again, a lot of folks will look at Dell Technologies as, oh, you have to be technical to work here. So further exploration of understanding what it takes in certain roles. I'm not sure if there's any officers on the call, or former officers, but, you know, I'd get a lot of, oh, I want to do operation work. Oh, okay. So do you want to do work in sales operations, you know, supply chain operations, you know, delivery operations? And they'll just look at you with a blank face. Operations. So it takes a little bit more deeper understanding of what the roles entail, and then how do those interact within the 4 walls of a particular company. And that's why I can't emphasize enough of building out your network and building out your community of people that you can reach out to and to better understand what those things look like. So I mentioned 4Block earlier, has a great program we partner with. as well as LinkedIn has a great opportunity for you to build your profile out there for others to see without your military picture on and without all that jargon kind of tucked in there. So it's work. It really is.
Right.
So those are some thoughts off the top of my head.
I just want a follow-on question though, because the Department of Defense will give a service member who's transitioning up to a year now before they transition out, right? Whether to participate in an apprenticeship program, a fellowship program, sort of reaching out to figure out how they want to transition. Do you think that's enough? Or when should somebody who's actually thinking about leaving the service, whether after their first term or they're in the first or second term, or even as a careerist, when should you really be starting to think about, I might be transitioning and what is it that I truly want to do? And then start doing sort of the hard homework that you really have to do to enable a successful transition.
1 year, yeah, I would take advantage of that full 1 year, because there's a lot of, I won't know tomorrow how many job openings I have available, but I do know if something pops up in cybersecurity, and I know the 3 people I spoke to last week, few months ago about it, that are coming available because they're transitioning out, they would probably be my first phone calls. So it's a journey, and the sooner you take your next career transition seriously and really put the effort into understanding, like, okay, it's not going to be a pencil whip exercise through TAP. I'm going to actually pay attention to what's being offered to me and then build on that, and then start to ask the other questions of why and how. I think that 1 year period gets you a chance to make some mistakes, kind of not go into some dead ends, because there'll be some dead end conversations that you have, and kind of really understand who you've spoken to and what about those conversations help you get excited about career potentials, so you can get a lot of that out of the way before, oh my gosh, in 2 months I'm exiting and I'm planning to move back to Nebraska. What am I going to be doing? Kind of takes that away.
So you think reaching out to somebody a year ahead of your transition, sit down, sort of just understand sort of what are the challenges that are going on in that industry or community that you're interested in, how you can best prepare yourself for that transition is appropriate. I
do. I certainly believe it is. Yeah, I get a lot of people that hunt me down through LinkedIn and want to have a conversation.
Sure.
And that's why I'm trying to have the Veterans Employee Resource Group do that for me, so that we can do it in more numbers massively, and get more of those discussions going for us.
Sure, appreciate it. Colin, we talked about the challenges, the AAPI and particularly the PI community is such a small community. And, you raised language, obviously, as sometimes a challenge, making sure we have the right translation services for people who are transitioning. But are there other culturally appropriate ways that we might better engage with the PI community?
Well, as I mentioned, yes, of course, I'll give you an example. Once they're transitioning out, they come out, and then there are some that are filing for claims, and seeing which they're eligible for. Sometimes it tends to be too technical for them. So they do, a VA person or a VSO, person can explain to them the process, but sometimes you may need a translator to help, guide them in the language. But also in language materials or in language, information is also good for, because of the elders, and in their family, is needed, sometimes. So, but culturally speaking,
well, here's an example. When as part of the commission work, we went out and in sort of underrepresented communities, particularly in the Black and African American communities, religious organizations plays a very strong role in some of these communities. And so down in Georgia, sort of engaging with religious organizations in that communities helped sort of get the appropriate healthcare services to those communities because they were hesitant in coming into hospitals, but getting them the services they needed was helpful. So they partnered with religious organizations down in Georgia. Are there things like that within the PI community that we should be aware of that we could leverage that is sort of culturally appropriate to the Pacific Islander communities, similar to what I just mentioned?
Right, okay. And I know of there is, yes, of course, they would go to churches, as I mentioned, community-based organizations. These are Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community-based organization, Pacific Islander churches, social and cultural groups. Okay, I know of a church that had provided a few workshops, you know, and this is a Samoan church. And what happened was we had put together, you know, within their church and like a flyer out to other churches that had veterans and that are interested in participating in this workshop, in filing, because they need someone in person from a VSO or a rep, a VA rep, to help them in how to register, because, you know, technology, they're not too savvy with technology, and these are well, veterans that need help in, because as I said, the language tend to be technical for them. So just guiding them through, you know, the questions and the process. But that is something we're trying to strengthen and help, you know, hopefully have like a more ongoing process for this church to help the vets. And yeah, so I mean, it is a start. It is a start, but you know, and also, like I said, that's why it's key when we have these cultural events, community health and wellness events, that we bring out the Department of Veterans to come and provide resources, have a table, exhibit table to provide resources and what they can do, hand out pamphlets and information such as that. So we're, you know, so Debra, we're continuing to build, you know, our structure with our veterans, you know, so yes.
It's great opportunities, great achievement. So Lou, obviously you spend a lot of time with transitioning veterans, working with them, meeting with them, having coffee, especially in this pandemic, probably virtually. Can you share with us some of maybe the sort of concerns that have been raised that you've heard over the years by veterans who are transitioning and how you responded to them?
Can you give me a better, an example perhaps of?
So I guess, you know, we talked about how a veteran who may be coming out may not know what they want to do, or maybe they even do, but just doesn't know how to get there. And so I'm trying to see if there's sort of some continuity when veterans transition of what they may not have thought about that you would raise with them, that they are think that might be a concern, but may not be really a concern, given that when you look at the transition, it's coming from them currently in uniform, but when you're on the other side, it may not be an issue for the civilian sector. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little convoluted question, but
no, it actually is pretty timely, because that's one thing we've seen a shift with the types of activities that we're having actually with the Veterans Employee Resource Group. So just backtracking a little bit. So within Dell, all of our employee resource groups have to have an executive sponsor that reports directly to Michael Dell. So in this instance, we have a gentleman that oversees our entire services organization of about 45,000 people. So it's significant, right? We want to make sure that's well supported. But we've noticed that the Veterans and Supporters efforts, we've kind of moved from community give back, where we're helping service dogs or helping to build a Fisher House or whatever those things may be, into more career related conversations. So just last month, we hosted a career panel to share stories more broadly about how successful veterans within Dell have made that transition, so they can give their real examples. One that pops to mind is a lieutenant colonel who participated in our partnership with the corporate fellowship program, and he was a data decision scientist, right? So he chose us over another technology company to have that experience. He came in as an individual contributor, and within the year, he was made a director, and the person that he did his fellowship with was now reporting to him, right? So how did you do that? So we want to understand, like, how did you make that transition? How did you make those connections? What did you do, and how did you leverage your experience within the fellowship program? And then once you were a full-time employee with us, how'd you navigate to get to that point where you could make a significant jump in your career? And that's everything all the way down to even our technical support individuals, how they've kind of come into the company, maybe at a earlier in career level, some of the challenges they did. So I see ourselves moving in this COVID world of sharing more examples of how we got here and what those challenges look like, so we can just help some people along the way. So that's been a big shift in kind of the mindset that we've had so far this year.
Great, thank you. So let me check and see if we had any other questions come in from the Facebook or from Zoom. And I think, Colin, actually I guess their question on disaggregated data for AAPI service members. I know you said you didn't have the specific data, but is there an anecdotal sense of which communities are engaged in the military to a larger degree? And would it be helpful, the question is, it would be helpful to know where we can point to for more granular data. Is there someplace that individuals who are interested can go to look for some more information that's more detailed?
Well, there is a 2010 census, and the 2020 census is, after everything is analyzed. But there are some data that we have been, like UCLA research team for COVID-19 for Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. They have a dashboard. I can give you my email, and they can email me, and I can, provide the information on where to go, provide the link that they can go to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
provide that to Nisha, and Nisha could put it on the Apex website for everyone so that
right. And
that'd be great.
speaking about in terms of which Pacific Islands, I know per capita the largest is American Samoa, Guam for the Chamorros, are the Pacific Islands as well as Hawaii. But those three are the highest in serving in the military and in veterans as well.
Great.
So, yeah, and I also wanted to make mention, that there are those Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders that are in the system of either their VSOs or with the Veterans Affairs offices, and sometimes we're grateful for their help coming out to help to help in their community, and it's just been a blessing for them to come out, like with Ron Suguden and at the Center of Minority Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C. Then we have, Noelani here in Los Angeles County. Then there's John Quichocho from Chamorro from San Diego, VA. So there's a few others, that has been tremendous, in working with our community, coming out and just asking, what is it that we can do to help, our communities? So I just wanted to give them props to.
That'd be great if they could be resources as well. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Lou, I think we have a question for you. The question is, what has been Dell's strategy for retaining veterans in your office?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, not enough. I'll be honest with you. It's a challenge, right? If you go research, right? There's a person earlier who said, right, it took them a few years to get settled to where they are.
Right.
And I see that too. I see some veterans jumping at what they think is the next best opportunity for them. And unfortunately, those jobs are probably underserved their potential. So I think that's the true sense of it. Once you do have a veteran, how do you hold on to that person? What I'm exploring right now with our HR business partners is, and it goes across a lot of folks have kind of followed the diversity category, if you will, is how do you hold on to the top talent that you do, and how do you offer mentoring programs, but also understanding what the next part in the career are. At Dell, we do a great job of hiring probably like almost out of college and then at the very high end sometimes. Mm-hmm. But what does the pipeline look like, throughput of how do I see my career here? Who are the leaders that I could see as that are like me as a veteran, or fill in the blank diversity, right? So we're doing a lot of intentional work on mentoring programs, leadership development programs, and other internal ways in combination with the employee resource groups and human resources. But yeah, never enough.
Great, thank you. We have one other question. Let's see. So here, the question is, only 1/3 of veterans are registered for VA healthcare. Is that true for the NHPI population too? If so, do you have an interest in finding them? At least getting healthcare would reduce the burden on the cost of living. And I guess, Colin, that question goes to you.
Well, thank you. Yes. So they're asking for a percentage of that are in healthcare.
Well, I think the question is the number of veterans who actually go and seek care from the VA is relatively small to the larger population of veterans. And I guess the question is, do you see that in the NHPI community as well? And if so, what could we do to address them? Well, encouraging them to come forward to get their care from the VA.
Yes. Well, it really depends, because those that are seeking health care have been registered for health care, and then there are those that are still trying to find their ways or claiming to receive health care. That's why I had mentioned earlier in terms of claims, benefits, healthcare is one. Sometimes there's obstacles where they have problems, so we have to go back and help. Well, where, follow up. Why are they having difficulties to just obtain, basic health care? And it really depends on the situation. But yes, as I said, that's something that we're still building. And yes, sometimes the percentage can be low, but it's being worked with, and we're working closely with not only the veteran themselves, but also the healthcare system, right, and the Department of Veterans Affairs.
So I think, Lou, I had one quick question, I guess, before we close is, I I don't know that this maybe hopefully has been changing over the years, but in the past, some of our transitioning veterans and even those who serve in the reserve would be hesitant in saying that they are a veteran or a transitioning veteran because companies weren't necessarily interested in hiring veterans because of the perceived challenges, whether it's PTS or some of the other things that veterans challenges that veterans may face. So when do you think I think we have seen some improvements in that, but I think that we might still have some transitioning service members wondering, like, when's the best time should I tell a company that I am a veteran, and that when is it that would actually be a helpful leverage for me versus something that somebody may use against me as a candidate?
Yeah, it's still a challenge to understand because every company is different in the culture and for understanding and awareness. So that's why we have intentional trainings for managers to understand, like, the rate of post-traumatic stress is not any higher in the military than it is in the general civilian population. So the awareness is a big component to that. I think you have to trust the recruiter or the person that you're working with to understand, is this culture going to make sense to me? Because, there might be associated with being a veteran, maybe you have a service-connected disability that you need an accommodation for. And if we don't know how we're going to accommodate that, we don't know what the full potential for that person may be. So we don't want to under-support a person if they're going to need certain services to help support them in their employment, because that's really what we're about. So there is a challenge there, and I've seen it getting better over the course of time, because one thing we do have for reservists as well is one thing if you want to continue to service in the reserves of the Guard, some companies do offer benefits in that area. So for us at Dell, there is, we do make your salary whole. For instance, I know a close friend of mine who just got called back up to active duty, having been with the company for the past 5 or 6 years, and he's going off to Afghanistan for the next year as a reservist. But he makes a lot more at Dell than he does as in 7. So we want to make sure that his family is intact with the salary that would be coming to him. So we want to make sure of that. And then we also have specific employee assistance program designed specifically for veterans. We understand that veterans can bring with them different challenges than the general population. So we actually, our service provider for EAP actually has veterans or people that have been trained on the cultural sensitivity of veterans to speak to those individuals up front. So by disclosing, you could actually find out more benefits and understanding of how does a company support their veterans and those that are currently serving the reserve and Guard.
Great, thank you very much. So I think our time has come to an end, but I want to give both of you an opportunity for any last words of wisdom and closing out comments. So Colin, why don't we start with you?
Well, all I'd like to say is that for veterans, I honor them. I am grateful to them for their sacrifices, as well as bravely defending our country. And of course, we should try to do what, help them to build themselves in whichever skill set, they may have. But I also like to thank Apex and you, Deborah, for facilitating and also inviting me to this wonderful panel. And, as we continue to work together to build our diverse communities and all communities for veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou?
That was beautifully stated. Yeah, absolutely. Paying it forward for myself is just an incredible journey for me to be able to, one person who is an E4 who shouldn't be working at Dell, to be able to have this platform, to be able to do this is always an honor for me. So thank you for the opportunity to allow me to come on and share some of the information I have in my head. But yeah, I would just tell veterans, don't be patient with some of the folks that you engage with in your career search, because chances are they're one of that less than the 99% that may not know really who you are. So be nice to them.
Well, great. We really appreciate your time today and your expertise and your experiences that you're sharing with us. And we appreciate you here. And I will turn it over to Madalene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. I also want to thank our panel sponsors, Dell Technologies and Toyota, for supporting today's conversation on veterans in the workforce. Join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern for our next Legislative Leadership Series panel, an informative and timely panel on voting rights and challenges in the 2020 election. Additionally, we have 2 great panels lined up for next week, including a conversation on AAPIs in the C-suite. That is on Tuesday, September 15th. And we'll also hear from AAPI immigration policy experts on Thursday, September 17th, at our panel on immigration and AAPI issue. You can register for these and other remaining policy discussions at our website, where you can also join us for APEC's celebration because Asian Prom has gone virtual. Register so that you can join us on October the 1st, and please be sure to RSVP to participate in any of these exciting activities at www.apex.org. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Melissa.
Appreciate it.